Before there was the new era of Survivor, before there was the eras of the 30s, whatever you call that, I guess, maybe the themes era, and before there was the era of just the worst seasons of Big Brother possible, there was an era of Survivor commonly referred to as the Dark Ages. What exactly is the Dark Ages? No, it's not some medieval period thing. It's the grouping of 4 Survivor seasons that were known at the time as some of the worst seasons of the show. This included Redemption Island, South Pacific, One World, wow, Philippines got so fucked over here, and Caramoan. My thoughts on these seasons are in this video, but to be honest, I think a lot of us have realized some of these seasons aren't that awful. I mean, Redemption Island is, but One World and Caramoan are just eh, while South Pacific I genuinely like. But forget about that. There's actually a bigger overarching era that took place during this time in Survivor. South Pacific and Caramoan have something in common. Redemption Island also has something in common with 2 seasons not in the Dark Ages, but they are in this bigger era. Those being Samoa and Heroes vs. Villains. And Big Brother 14 also has something in common with these seasons. All of these seasons of reality television had someone with the last name Hantz on them. This is the Hantz Era. From 2009 to 2013, CBS reality TV was bombarded by the Hantz family. Russell Hantz was and is still the biggest, as he's one of the most notorious Survivor players of all time. I mean, he is still talked about a lot to this day. People still argue about whether or not he should have won at least 1 or 2 seasons of Survivor. Although nobody really brings up his time on Redemption Island, but that's just because,
Third person voted out of Survivor Redemption Island. Russell.
or even his appearance on Australian Survivor, and that's just because.
Second person voted out from Australian Survivor Champions versus Contenders. Russell.
But going back to Russell's first season, Survivor Samoa, that season might as well have been called Survivor Russell Hantz, because he completely dominates all the screen time on that season. There's a reason why there's a whole fan-made version of the season that deliberately edits him out in some places. Russell was a huge strategic force that laid the groundwork for future survivors when it came to finding idols without a clue. He also started his own tactic of always aligning with the women, due to finding them dumber, and sticking with that until the end. Despite how well Russell may have played and how he totally dominated everything, Russell was terrible at jury management. He never made the social connections with people that were necessary, so everyone just thought of him as a huge dick, which, I mean, was kind of a correct assessment. Natalie White ended up winning the season, and I would say deservedly so. Fight me, I don't care. But the Russell show was far from over. After the filming of Survivor Samoa, Russell was immediately cast onto the next and 20th season, Heroes vs. Villains, which filmed only 2 or 3 weeks after Samoa. This meant that Russell was going back to back super quickly, which also meant that everybody else on the season had no idea who he was. He was a complete unknown to everybody, so even though Survivor fans became very accustomed to him through watching Samoa, the contestants on Heroes vs. Villains were left wondering who the hell this dude was. That meant in turn that another season of the Russell show commenced. Russell did the same kind of things he did on Samoa. He aligned with the women, Parvati and Danielle mainly, he kept finding idols, and he kept being a strategic force that went against anybody who posed a threat to him. Now, I'll be honest, Russell is definitely too much for me on Samoa, but on Heroes vs. Villains, I do find him quite enjoyable. It helps that the edit of the show is constantly clowning on him, always including comments from other contestants just dissing him. There is a lot of funny Russell moments this season. But despite all of that, Russell ran into the exact same problem he did on Samoa. Despite playing a good game, I guess, he was still a dick to everybody. They all hated his guts, and it's not like he did anything for them to actually like him. So for a second season in a row, Russell made it to the final tribal council and lost, this time to Sandra, who became the first 2-time winner. Again, she deserved it. Fight me. So that's 2 seasons in a row of Russell. Surely enough, right? Nope, because at the reunion of Heroes vs. Villains, Russell was still the star of the show. He got into it with so many members of the cast, but the biggest argument here was between him and Boston Rob, where they teased going head to head for real on another season of Survivor. This turned out to be a wet dream for Jeff Probst because 2 seasons later and a year later in 2011, Survivor Redemption Island aired. The whole premise of the season was that there were 16 new contestants, but they'd be accompanied by Russell and Boston Rob, who would basically be the tribe leaders for their respective tribes. Everybody knows that this season sucked, like, a lot, but hey, Russell did the exact same things he did on his 2 previous seasons. He found an idol. Hello, this is Noah as I am editing this video, and I'm an idiot because Russell did not find an idol this episode. I don't know what I was talking about here, but oopsies. My mistake. And he made an alliance with two of the women. And he also made the final chat. Oh, wait, yeah, you already know what happens. He was voted out extremely early, and then he got beaten on Redemption Island. Yeah, going from a two-time finalist to the second person eliminated is a big fall from grace. But honestly, I really do wish Russell made it farther onto the season because I really think he would have made it at least more entertaining than just about everybody else in the season, but oh well. Now, that was kind of a sad ending, although Russell did get a good amount of karma for all the turmoil he caused for 2 seasons straight. Now, while this was the end of Russell until Australian Survivor in 2018, this was not the end for the Hantz family. Oh no, the season right after Redemption Island was South Pacific. At the end of the same year in 2011, the world was introduced to a brand new member of the Hantz family, Brandon Hantz, the nephew of Russell. South Pacific also used the exact same format as Redemption Island, with the Redemption Island twist, as well as 2 returning Survivor players. Now, the journey of Brandon on Survivor is quite a doozy. It's very tragic in a way, but fascinating to watch nonetheless. I actually do like Brandon on South Pacific, although there is that weird stuff with Michaela. Brandon's whole story was about him being a Hantz, and due to Russell's image, Brandon wanted to rebuild the Hantz name and bring some good to it. He tried to hide his true identity, despite the fact that he literally has a tattoo with his last name on it, and that didn't really last long, as he eventually revealed that he was Russell's nephew all along. Brandon's journey also had a lot to do with his belief in God and Christ, as did the season itself, to be honest, as Brandon's alliance known as the Family was led by Coach, and they were very much like a religious cult in some ways. They were always praying and talking about God, and I do think in some ways Coach leaned into this much more to gain the trust of people such as Brandon, who took this extremely seriously. Brandon saw all of this as like a reawakening of himself, wanting to be a better version of himself, and this did hurt him at times. Unlike Russell, he was much more sympathetic and selfless towards others, although maybe a bit too selfless. Like when they had the loved ones visit and Brandon's loved one ended up being his father, one of Russell's brothers of course, his dad was like, okay, so Brandon was explaining to his dad that he wasn't all about winning and already felt satisfied with his journey because of his relationship with Christ. It wasn't about the money for him anymore. His dad was just annoyed about this instead of like trying to support him, which I've always found pretty sad. Then Brandon won individual immunity when they were down to the final 5, and despite this, Brandon felt very strongly about giving up and handing it to Albert, who he genuinely valued as a friend. So he ended up following through on that at Tribal Council by giving individual immunity to Albert instead, as he believed it was the right thing to do, and he believed he wouldn't be voted out, until he was. Brandon got voted out by the remaining members of his alliance. He genuinely saw Coach and Albert as his real friends, but they betrayed him. And when it came time for his Redemption Island duel, he lost to Ozzy. But he wasn't sad about it at all. He felt very liberated by the whole experience, and I guess in the end, he left as a happy man, which is good. But this journey actually continues and then ends at the South Pacific reunion show, where Russell Hantz himself was given like 10 seconds basically to give his opinions on Brandon's game, and even though he didn't want to, he totally ripped into his nephew and how horribly he played the game. Like, this whole season, I just felt bad for Brandon because this did not feel like the right environment for him to be in. I still did enjoy watching him and his journey on this season, but there was just all this pressure on him simply for what his last name was, and of course he put a lot of this on himself as well, but it was just kind of tragic. Now, Brandon's time on Survivor is still not over, but I want to follow along with the timeline of the Hantzens on reality TV. Now, Russell did have another show in 2012, which is crazy, but this time it wasn't on CBS, and it wasn't Survivor-like at all. It was with Russell and Sean Hantz, who was Brandon's father. It was called Flipped Off, and it was all about the Hantz brothers flipping properties and other real estate stuff, I guess. I've low-key thought about checking it out, but if anyone does want to, it's on Pluto TV. Anyways, back to the real stuff. Now, a month after this, and like just over half a year after the airing of South Pacific, it was time for one of CBS's other big shows, Big Brother. Yeah, the Hantz family was also ready to invade Big Brother, and this time it was a brand new member of the family on television. Big Brother 14 saw the debut of Russell's other brother, Willie Hantz. Oh wait, Russell did appear in Willie's introduction video, so Russell was on the season actually, I guess. But anyways, Willie Hantz was now on Big Brother. Despite not wanting to reveal he was related to Russell in the same way that Brandon didn't because of the negative connotations, so many people in the house immediately clocked it. It didn't really help that he looks just like Russell, Russell, so it was easy for people to piece together. Big Brother 14 brought back 4 past players to act as coaches who'd each lead their own teams. Funny how all the Hantzes have been on a season with this type of twist. Anyways, Willie was chosen to be on Brittany's team, and after the first competition, Brittany chose Willie to become the first head of household. This quickly went downhill for him as he began feuding with Frank. He initially wanted to keep him around, but that changed when they began fighting with each other, and once that happened, everyone started to think much more negatively about Willie. It didn't help that Willie was acting more and more paranoid, and so this HOH reign of his quickly turned everyone else against him. Frank ended up not being evicted, and then he won the next HOH competition because, of course. In addition to Frank, everybody else in the house, including the coaches, hated Willie, and he was undoubtedly enemy number 1. Eventually, the pressure and paranoia just got too much for Willie. He was extremely heated about everything, and in the end, he got into an altercation with Joe, where he legit headbutted Joe, and after that, Willie was swiftly ejected from the show. I will say that is quite a way to leave the show. Being removed from Big Brother for violence is just crazy, but Willie proved in very quick time that he was pretty similar to Russell in some ways, as it came to their intensity and how they wanted to play the game. And that was the end of the Hantz experiment on Big Brother, but we're not done with this family's era just yet. The following year in 2013 came the 26th season of Survivor Caramoan, which was the show's second edition of its fans versus favorites theme. I could say a lot about the people they chose to bring back for this season, but I'm focused on one man here, and that is Brandon Hantz. Yeah, after all that he went through on South Pacific, he decided to come back for another season. Now this is yet another tragic yet fascinating watch when it comes to Brandon. Brandon seemed to be his normal kind of humble self at first and was included in Philip's alliance known as Stealth R Us. But there were a lot of things that just kept pissing Brandon off this season. He didn't like that Francesca was voted out, he didn't like Philip just in general, and he really didn't like how much control Philip had and how much he talked about Brandon behind his back. Brandon eventually completely snapped and dumped out all of his tribe's rice and beans. It was very surreal to see something like this on Survivor where someone snapped like this and brought his whole tribe down with him. And then came the more infamous moment where Brandon and Philip got into a huge fight and Brandon had another meltdown before the immunity challenge could even start. It got so bad that Jeff was having to almost restrain Brandon and calm him down from doing anything too drastic. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this was very fascinating to watch. Like, Brandon telling the fans that they could now starve alongside the favorites is always a really interesting point for me. But the other big part of all this was that due to the circumstances, they had a pseudo version of tribal council and voted out Brandon right there. Again, this was just kind of sad to watch, and it was a lot more apparent here than in South Pacific that this just wasn't the right environment for Brandon to be in. But it is definitely a unique way for the Hantz era to end. Going from the highs of Russell making it to the end twice in a row, to then 3 other seasons of early eliminations, ejections, and meltdowns. At least Brandon made it far in South Pacific. There really is no replicating the Hantz era again because it all took place over the span of just 5 years, and it's not like there's some other super dramatic family like this appearing on Survivor or Big Brother these days. I think at the time, it was definitely annoying just seeing more and more of Russell and those related to him popping up on these shows as like constant reminder of the Hantz name, but I don't know. Looking back on this era, it's pretty crazy. It's not all that bad, honestly. And Russell himself came back to reality TV in 2018 when he was on Australian Survivor, although that didn't really end well. But look, I'm not saying we need the whole family back on TV, and I mean, there's circumstances that would prevent that anyways, but I'm just saying, I think we're due for Russell to come back on something. Traitors, as villains, I don't know, but I would love to see Russell back on something. I think it's time. That's all I'm saying. Russell, Brandon, and Willie each had some very unique journeys across their different shows, and it's clear that CBS was in love with this family, and I guess because of the success and notorious nature of Russell, it's easy to see why they wanted them to keep coming. From 2009 to 2013, CBS's reality shows were subject to one of its most interesting eras dominated by the influence of Russell Hantz, and it's just wild looking back to see what the follow-ups were on Samoa and Heroes vs. Villains. But there really is no replicating the Hantz era, and that is for sure. Let me know down below what your opinions are on the Hantz era and what you think about the different relatives that have been on TV. Also, let me know what else you'd like to see me talk about on this channel. Like the video, subscribe for more videos, and yeah, thank you for watching.